headlines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. With you, as always, this is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. And today we're talking about CPAC and the things that will transpire as we move forward. The divisions in the Republican Party continue to be seen based on the sparring that started on the Sunday morning political talk shows. Karl Rove, in particular, took a lot of heat and a lot of jabs, not just from Sarah Palin, but from a lot of speakers at CPAC. They attacked largely the political consulting class as a whole, but of all the political consultants who were listed by name, almost exclusively Karl Rove. I found it very interesting, though, that when Karl was doing his little sparring back and forth, he didn't take any cheap shots at anybody else, just Sarah Palin. Now, I haven't had a chance to listen to all the speeches yet. I do plan on going back and listening to them. I intentionally tried not to pay much attention to the media coverage of the speeches because I wanted to go back on my own, listen to as many of them as I could, which most of them have been archived either on the C-SPAN website or on some various other sites. If you're interested in looking them up, it should be easy enough to do. But of the speeches that I have listened to so far, the most noteworthy, due to the total number of soundbite-worthy statements, was easily Sarah Palin's. I think Karl specifically targeted her, not just because she did a very dynamic speech that really seemed to get the attention of the majority of people attending, but also because she still seems like the easy target. He knew that he's going to get some traction there. But before we delve too far into it, just in case you missed it, today the Steubenville rape trial came to an end. The judge announced that the defendants, Trent Mays and Malik Richmond, were found guilty. They had been accused of sexually assaulting a severely intoxicated girl that they knew from school. Video and photo footage from the night of the incident spread across the internet soon after, drawing national attention to the case. Mays and Richmond were both football players at Steubenville High School. They received a delinquent verdict on all three charges. Now, for those of you who may not be lawyers, a delinquent verdict, let's try one more time. A delinquent verdict, there we go, sorry about that, is basically the same thing as a guilty verdict. It just applies specifically to juvenile courts. They were both convicted of digitally penetrating the West Virginia girl and schoolmate, and Mays was also found guilty of illegal use of a minor in nudity-oriented material, which means took some pictures and some videos, evidently. The boys will, according to some reports, serve a full sentence at a juvenile detention facility until they turn 21. Now, I understand that sentencing actually has not taken place yet, so we've yet to know exactly what the full extent will be. But according to the reports that say that they will, there's a pretty good chance that those reports are right. 117, 116, chances of them getting out of juvie before age 21 are pretty slim. Of course, the defendants and their family members openly wept in court when they had the verdict read. The victim, who has not been identified, testified in court on Saturday that she didn't remember the attack, but that she did remember waking up naked in a house she did not recognize. Other members of the small Ohio community also testified against the defendants. This trial, as I'm sure you probably remember if you've been following this case at all, widely divided the town. Mays is just 17 years old. Richmond is 16. And these charges supposedly first took place in the back seat of a car after an alcohol-fueled party on August 11th, and then in the basement of a house. Mays was also found guilty on the charge of the illegal use of minor and nudity-oriented material. That was a direct result of some of the pictures, and it's my understanding there was some video footage. I'm not sure whose that was. I get from the reports I've read, I don't think that was Mays. But obviously there was room for some more charges. These two took the fall for a large number of people that were involved in this case. They're both members of the football team, which is one of the few sources of pride left in this particular community after the steel mills closed down, so most of the jobs there were gone. Small town football, high school football pride. This story cut the community in half. Strangely, the media is already kind of cutting back and forth into each other on this, as the Huffington Post has already wrote an article questioning CNN's coverage of the verdict, as CNN focused on the effect that these verdicts will have on the two young men and said very little about the effects that this will have on the victim. Now, what's strange about that is the HuffPost and CNN are typically on the same page when it comes to a lot of these type of things. Obviously, they picked up on something that CNN didn't notice. Now, there was all kinds of drama around this case. You had a lot of folks who felt like no real harm was done. You had a lot of folks who felt like, even though what the boys did were wrong, that because she couldn't remember anything, it couldn't really hurt her. All of that ignores the simple truth, and that is that these kids should not be at an alcohol-fueled party, period. Where was the parental guidance? Yeah, kids get away with throwing parties when certain things take shape. The right parents go out of town, great party at their house, hey, come on, show up. And you can't keep your eye that closely on your teenage kids, but you have to make the effort. How did this girl disappear from, obviously, she lives in West Virginia, but goes to school in this particular Ohio community. Obviously, geographically, they live in a border town. How does a girl that lives in a different state go missing overnight? What was the story? What was really going on? There was plenty of blame to go around here. But what surprises me as much as anything is that there seemed to have been some other boys that were involved in this case, and they cut deals. They testified. They backtracked and rolled over on their friends so that they would be so that these two guys would be the only ones held accountable for this. They weren't the only two guilty parties. There's a lot of things wrong with this, but when the HuffPost, rather than wanting to talk about the tragedy that this story is, would rather tear into CNN because of how they chose to cover it, well, that boggles my mind too, because it's not as though CNN completely ignored what's going on with this girl. But responsible journalism would try to put as much emphasis away from the victim as possible, because there's a reason why she hasn't been identified. The people in the town know who she is, but on the national scene, at some point, this girl's probably going to have to move away because this happened. She's not going to be welcome in this town by at least a half of the people who felt like this should have never went to trial. She's going to have to move when she gets older. So CNN did a responsible thing by staying away from talking about her. and talk about the tragedy that is when these two young men who had their lives ahead of them have basically ruined their life based on a couple of stupid choices that they made while under the influence of alcohol, which, again, was a stupid choice on their own. This is a cautionary tale, and this was the focus CNN made. Is that worthy of being ripped into by the HuffPost? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, they have a legitimate point that there should be empathy for the victim. But when CNN's obviously trying to detract you away from looking at the girl and trying to find out who she is and making it more difficult for her and her life down the road, well, that's downright humane. Something I also would not expect from CNN. Anyway, that's the top of the news today. No real offbeat today. We're just going to kick right into it. Today is St. Patrick's Day. Hope everyone has enjoyed their St. Patrick's Day here in East Tennessee. It was a lovely, beautiful Sunday. And I hope most of you out there had a chance to enjoy it. In the meanwhile, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of Sarah Palin at CPAC, and we'll talk about CPAC in general after we do that. And we have some sound bites from Sarah Palin's speech, so stay with us.
Happy St. Patty's Day, and may the luck of the Irish be with you for all the year. Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog post and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. TapIntoTheTruth.com is up. It is still a work in progress. It will never be completely finished because we'll be making changes and updates as we go along. But the basic format is there now. We do have our blog post up with a couple of blogs already there at the moment. And we do have links to all of our broadcasts from both Spreaker and from other formatting sources. So be sure to check us out, and check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth. And remember, tap is spelled with 2 P's when it comes to the show. Because, you know, trying to be clever, I thought it would be cute to spell it like my last name. At any rate, we are talking about CPAC. It's pretty much over at this point. So what now? What do we do as conservatives? How do we move forward? As I already mentioned earlier, there were a couple of themes that reoccurred throughout the majority of the speakers' speeches. Regardless of who they were, what their background was, there were certain things that continued to come forward. Among them, chiefly, was there still a lot of anger about the election. Understandably so. What I found odd, although we've heard this before, especially from Tea Party folks, even before the election, I heard it from other radio commentators, conservative people who have a mind to speak their mind and who are not necessarily tied to the party, in this case the party being the Republican Party, have said on multiple occasions that the grassroots are being ignored, and that the average conservative who typically sides with the Republican, who's typically the base of the Republican Party, have been ignored because the establishment, the party leadership, the folks on high, well, they're not really conservative, or at least most of them aren't. They like to say they are, at least when it comes to fiscal issues, if nothing else, but even that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of very liberal people that are among the establishment Republicans.